Hi there, Michael here. A couple of days ago, Sound Particles released a new plugin called Beat Penner. Its main purpose is to make penning of sounds in immersive or spatial audio production easy and fun. Think of it as an auto penner in 3 dimensions. As regular viewers of this channel know, I'm a big fan of Sound Particles and most of their plugins. Sound Particles is one of the plugin development companies that is actually built on real acoustic research. Their plugins are not just beautified implementations of already existing algorithms, they genuinely innovate. So in today's video I want to have a look at Beat Penner, what it does and who it could be useful for. But before we continue, a quick disclaimer. Sound Particles sent me a review license of Beat Penner for free, but this is not a sponsored video. Sound Particles had not seen the video before it went live, and they have no influence on what I'm going to talk about. Everything I'm going to say is strictly my own opinion. And with that being said, let's open up Reaper and load in Beat Penner. So here I have Reaper, and what is probably the simplest Reaper session that you can possibly have. It is just one track, and that one track has just one MIDI file with one MIDI node, and that one MIDI node is driving an instance of Tune with one of those one-finger presets. I like to use those for demonstration because they are simple and really we don't need a lot. We just need to demonstrate how the panning works, and for that we just need a little bit of audio. That's really all. Now I'm going to work on a Mac, but anything that I'm going to show you works on Windows as well and on pretty much any digital audio workstation as long as it has multi-channel capabilities. Now you could technically use that in a stereo DAW as well, but it doesn't quite frankly make a lot of sense to do it that way. So you would need a multi-channel DAW in order to get the full functionality of that plugin. Now I've already prepared everything to receive multi-channel audio, so Tune sits on a multi-channel track, on a 16-channel track to be exact, and I'm going to use a 9.1.6 layout. So one thing that I need to do in order for you guys to hear something is I need to convert that back into stereo, and for that purpose I'm using Virtuoso, which is one of the channel favorites. This is essentially a plugin that takes in 9.1.6 and converts that into a binaural signal so that you guys can hear what I'm hearing. And with that being said, let's just play the audio. Now currently, once again, this is just sitting on the stereo channel, so let's just play the audio a little. So once again we have Tune here, just playing this one finger preset, and that is then going into Virtuoso, and Virtuoso is converting that into binaural. Once again, currently we only have a stereo signal coming in, but it is set up to receive a 9.1.6 signal. So let's load in the Beat Penner plugin, and for that I'm first going to close Virtuoso here, and then we are going to simply add a Beat Penner plugin here after Tune. So let's load in Beat Penner in VST3 version. Now if you have been working with Sound Particles, you know they have a very specific layout. They have this polygon layout here, but fortunately you can actually switch that to a different layout if you don't like the polygon layout, because for me at least it is always a little bit confusing what that actually is. Now there are mathematical reasons why they do it that way, and they do it consistently in all their plugins, but if you don't like that, you can actually switch that over. So what you need to do is you need to right click here, and you can simply switch over to Room. That would then kind of show you the room layout. Now, since we are on a 16-channel track, the plugin assumed that we want to work with 9.1.6 as an output as well as an input format. And we can actually change that. So we can change the input format to pretty much anything that we want. So we do have a lot of options, and this is actually quite unique. We even have some ambisonics options. So if you're working with ambisonics, you can do that. Now currently I'm having that on a 16-channel track, so it only allows up to third order. But if you have more channels on your track, you can go up to sixth order ambisonics, which is quite interesting. And you can change that to any input format that you want. Now in our particular case, we're going to work only with stereo. Just one word with the ambisonics. Ambisonics works a little bit different because ambisonics isn't really a channel-based format. It's more of a scene-based format. So when you switch over to ambisonics, the things that the plugin does work a little bit differently. In particular, you can only pan the W channel, so only the Omni channel, which makes sense. And since this is a little bit different, I might actually do a separate video just about how to use this plugin with ambisonics. Not quite sure yet. Most of you out there are probably not really interested in that. Most of you are probably going to work with regular channel-based audio. Now, in my particular case, once again, since this is an instance of Tune on this track, which outputs stereo, so I'm going to switch that over to stereo. And the output channel, similarly, you can change to anything that you want. So you can use any layout that you like, and could also be ambisonics in exactly the same way. Now let's first have a look at the interface. Now, as I said before, we have the visualization of the objects in three-dimensional space here. We can switch that over to a couple of different visualizations. As I said before, we can use the polygon layout, which is the sound particles typical layout. We can also do a circle if we want to, and there's also the possibility to do a stereo visualization if we want to. Usually I prefer to choose the room visualization because that's sort of really the way we usually work with immersive audio. Most panners that you have will actually have some sort of room visualization here. Now, down here we have the sequencer. So this kind of gives you the position. So currently we have 4 positions, position 1, position 2, position 3, position 4. We have an incoming stereo signal, so we have a left channel and a right channel that we can choose. If we want to switch that, or if you're working with a different multi-channel layout, so for example, if I switch that back to 9.1.6, you will actually see that I can switch the positions for each individual channel separately, which is actually really nice. So if you have a very complex multi-channel signal that you want to pan around and you want to switch out channel positions and kind of move things in very unexpected ways, you can do that. But let's switch that back to stereo because that's what we have here. Now for each of those positions, we can choose whatever channel we want to pan. So for example, say in the first position, I want to pan the left channel, and then I can do that here with the azimuth. So I can move that around and the elevation up and down, and that will allow me to pan the position of that. And I can do that for each individual position and each individual channel. So if you have a 9.1.6 signal, that is essentially 16 positions for the 16 channels for each individual position of the object, if that makes sense. So let's load in a preset because that's probably the easiest way to kind of get started. So let's just do maybe the 16-step preset, and that will move the position of the sound around in three-dimensional space. Now, if I now play that, you're going to have some sort of a 3D impression, but it's not going to be super accurate because, once again, I'm going to convert that back into binaural so that you can hear that on YouTube. So you're not going to have the full immersive experience. If you really want to get the most out of this plugin, you would have to work with an actual multi-channel setup. So let's just play the audio and play around with the interface a little. Now, as you can see, it's going through the individual positions that are set here in the sequencer. Now, it's doing that rather quickly because it's currently set at the rate of 1/32, which is a bit fast. So let's just kind of slow that down a bit, maybe to 1/4. I can also kind of separate. So currently it's synced to the digital audio workstation, but I can actually separate that if you want to. And I can give it a little bit of an offset. So if I want the change in position not exactly on the beat, I can move that back and forth a couple of milliseconds if I want to. Now, one thing that's really interesting here is the movement section here. This gives us some possibility on how the sound actually changes from one position to the next. So currently it's just jumping from one to the next, and actually kind of let me switch that over to polygon, but because that's actually one of the things where this is a little bit more visible. So what I can do here is I can, for example, do a glide, and glide essentially just means that it is going to not jump directly, but it's actually kind of moving rather slowly, and I can change for how much it's going to glide. So if I move that over to 100%, it's just kind of gliding slowly from one position to the next. And here in this kind of little thingy here, you see essentially how it actually glides from one to the next. So let's maybe do that like that. We also have a little bit of a diverge option, and that essentially means if I increase that, what will happen is it will change the position not exactly to the position that you have dialed in, but to somewhere in the vicinity. That gives it a little bit more of a variation, and that's actually also something that's really cool and nice. And then we have this float thing here, and this float just means that it's doing something interesting whenever it's arriving at the final position. So let's just kind of change that. So as you can see, it's going to kind of float around a little whenever it reaches a new position. So that's actually really, really cool. A couple of additional options. We have the possibility to change the direction of the sound. So if it's currently kind of moving in the forward direction, but I can also change that to the backward direction. That would then essentially kind of move it backwards. I can send it back and forth if I want to. And I can also randomize that if I want to. So that essentially would then switch positions randomly. So this is actually really, really cool. I can add steps and remove steps. And whenever I'm changing a position, so let me just stop the audio for a second. So whenever I change a position here, and I'm working with a stereo signal, I can also tell it to link the left and right channel so that I don't have to set them individually. So currently they're linked at 180 degrees, but I can actually change that if I want to. And that essentially means that whenever I'm changing, so for example, this position here, so let me just kind of change that a little, it will automatically also change the corresponding right channel so that the left and right channel are always 180 degrees separated. Couple of additional options. We have a dry-wet knob here that allows you to mix in some of the dry signal if you want to. We have a mixer knob that allows you to mix the output channel. So if I want to, for example, reduce the left-wide signal a little for whatever reason, I can do that. So that is nice. And then I have a lock knob, and that lock knob essentially just means that you're locking in the whatever's in the output section. So only the dry-wet knob, the master, gain, and the mixer settings. And that essentially kind of will make sure that when you're switching presets, the actual output options are going to be the same. So this is not locking the entire preset, it's just locking the output section. And that's actually really nice. Now we do have the option to have multiple patterns, and we can actually switch between them rather quickly by just kind of going from one to the next. And that will allow us to switch between patterns in one instance of BeatPanner. And then one final thing, if you have no clue what you're doing, there is a randomize button that allows you to populate the plugin with random parameters. And in order to demonstrate, I probably need to close the mixer view here. And this is the randomize button. So if I click on that, it's going to simply randomize all the settings, and this works actually reasonably well. So this is usually a good starting point, and then you can fine-tune everything, and that works actually reasonably well. So what's my final verdict? Well, I really like the way Sound Particles have approached this. The interface is very straightforward, and the fact that it can work with pretty much any multi-channel format for output as well as input, including Ambisonics up to 6th order and more obscure formats such as the NHK 22.2 layout or Sony's 360RA, this is a big plus. If you are working with any form of multi-channel audio and need a plugin to pan the channels individually and automatically, this is really an interesting option. I also really like the glide, divergence and float controls. They are really easy to use and give the movement a bit more interest. There's only one issue, and that is that if you're working with any object-based audio format that requires a specific panner, such as Dolby Atmos for example, you can't really use BeatPanner. For this purpose, it would be necessary to somehow record the automation of the panning positions and copy them into the automation lanes of the object panners. And that is currently not possible with BeatPanner. So it is really only useful for regular multi-channel audio. Now, next week I'm going to check out another new panning plugin that approaches the same functionality slightly differently, and that plugin will allow us to copy sound position automation into the automation lanes of the object panners of whatever object-oriented audio format you are working with. If that's something that tickles your fancy, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Well, that's everything for today. If you have any questions or comments, drop them in the comment section below or join our free Discord server. The invite link is in the description. And don't forget to subscribe to stay updated on all things Dolby Atmos and immersive audio. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.